For you to be a great leader, you need to be very strong in three aspects. One is how well you manage the business, how well you manage people, and how good are you in terms of execution.
What is competency?
It's a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitude, which is consistently demonstrated.
So can you give examples?
Leadership competencies, business acumen, customer relationship building, innovation, decision making.
How is that possible for the assessors to come with a horoscope of these participants?
We have this methodology like Assessment Development Center, 360-degree feedback, and there are other methods also, including use of psychometric tools, etc.
Can you please alleviate the fear factor? I mean, that has been created by specialists like you, who are the biggest votaries of competency framework.
It's not to say it's only through Assessment Development Center, facilitated by an expert, trained assessor, that we would be able to understand the strengths and limitations of an individual. We're not saying that. This can well be done by the internal facilitators as well, provided if they are trained to assess competency. So it's a scientific process. It's a very proven scientific process which is practiced across the globe.
Thanks for joining this podcast.
Pleasure is mine.
Karthik, what made you to come forward for a podcast like this? I believe that you are going to discuss about competency framework. I also believe that I vaguely remember that kind of a program you launched, and that also focused on competency framework.
I think this is a new attempt, I would say.
Okay.
The last time when we did in 2014-15,
Yes.
The whole idea was, if you look at in the HR learning space, a lot of things that we are learning is through books, and recent times through LMS and all that we are learning.
True.
But I think there is very little educative videos that are available in the public domain.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of videos that are more concept related, that are more skill related. But when it comes to HR concepts and videos on HR concepts, to provide a detailed insight on what it is and how it can be applied in organizations, I must say that coming up with certain videos which will be just not be educative, but it will also create the curiosity for the HR fraternity to learn more on the subject.
From a layman's perspective, can you please explain for everyone's benefit what is competency? Because we get to hear a lot of things like competency, then skill, then knowledge, then attitude. Whether it is all of this together or it is something different, I mean, there is a lot of confusion. So if you can throw some light on that. Yes.
The simple way to understand the term competency is, so we know what is knowledge, we know what is skill. A lot of us do use the term called attitude, but when we are asked to decode the term called attitude, but we find it very difficult. So the one factor which makes a difference to the entire subject of competency is the attitude element. So in simple words, the behaviors that get demonstrated by individuals is a manifestation of knowledge, skill, and attitude.
All right.
So in organizations, when you find people demonstrate different behaviors, it emanates from the knowledge that they possess, the skills that they have learned over a period of time, and of course, the attitude which are indirectly driven by their beliefs and values.
Mm-hmm.
So competency, in a simple term, is a combination of knowledge, skills, and attitude,
Okay.
which is consistently demonstrated, which differentiates between an average performer and a superior performer. So this is in simple term one can understand.
What I mean to ask is, do you have something called behavioral competency, or there is something which will help the functional aspects of it? I mean, what are your take on that?
Yeah, so let's look at the very purpose of why competency development. So why should organizations invest in competency development?
Yes.
So as you know, retaining talent is one of the biggest challenges for most organizations.
True.
And if you have to retain, you will have to show them a career path.
Yes.
If you have to show them a career path, you need to clearly understand as to what it takes for a individual to move from one role to another role.
True.
Only then the organization can provide them a career growth and as well as get the best out of the individual in that particular role.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, the individual not every employee who comes into the organization would come with the complete understanding of where am I good at and what do I need to learn more.
Okay.
So this is a kind of a platform that organization creates for both the employer to understand what sort of skills and knowledge that are required to be demonstrated by the role holder. And similarly, the employee must also know what is required in my current role and what am I required to learn for the future roles.
Okay.
So in this whole platform, it's both behavioral and functional. So when I say functional, it's also called as technical, occupational, professional. So the nomenclatures are many,
Okay.
but generally we use the term called functional because functional is all about the knowledge and skills one is required to have to deliver the key elements of their job responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas behavioral is all about the level of leadership role that you possess and what sort of leadership characteristics that you're required to demonstrate in that particular role. For example, managing self, managing team, managing function, managing managers, managing business, managing enterprise. So typically, any organization would have this 6 or 7 levels of leadership levels.
Mm-hmm.
So, if only the organization knows whether this particular role falls in which leadership level, they'll be able to define the kind of competencies required on the behavioral and leadership side for the particular role. So, in a way, just to conclude on the question that you've asked, so in my understanding, organizations typically would follow 3 clusters of competencies.
Okay.
One is behavioral competencies, which are also called as leadership competencies, managerial competencies, etc. The second is the functional competencies, which we spoke. And the third one is core competencies or foundational competencies, which again
Okay.
emanates from the values
The
and
vision,
beliefs of the
values, and
organization. Yeah.
okay,
So broadly,
organization.
3 clusters. Any organization
Okay.
across sectors, across regions, I have only found them practicing this 3 clusters of competencies.
Great. So, can you give examples of these few competencies?
So when we say leadership competencies, business acumen, uh, customer relationship building, innovation, decision making, uh, interpersonal relationship, coaching, mentoring, analytical thinking, these are all the examples of what we call it as leadership competencies.
Okay.
So the one simplified way to define these leadership competencies is, you can look at a 3-dimensional approach to build this leadership framework. One
Mm-hmm.
is for you to be a great leader, you need to be very strong in 3 aspects. One is how well you manage the business,
Yeah.
how well you manage people, and how good are you in terms of execution.
Okay.
So on the execution side, we all know that you need to have certain competencies like problem solving, decision making, your planning and coordination, risk
Mm-hmm.
taking, and things like that. So those are all related to completely execution focused competencies. So which means
Okay.
that the person is so good in executing the projects or executing the task, and he or she uses those competencies to deliver the results. Whereas when you look at how good the person is on managing people's side, that is where things like how good am I in terms of my subordinate development, coaching, mentoring, conflict management, relationship building, all of those elements related to managing people, managing myself, forms part of those leadership of people. On the business side, it's about my business acumen, my strategic thinking, my ability to invent the future, innovation. So all of this comes on the managing business side. So collectively, if you have to look at someone as a great leader, you
Mm-hmm.
need to necessarily have competencies on all these 3 dimensions for any leadership role.
Okay. So, when we speak about this competency framework per se, what are the key steps involved in creating this framework?
So essentially, there are 3 stages. One is design stage, the second is assessment stage, and third is a development stage. Design stage is where you study the roles, you study the leadership levels, you study the business, you study the organization requirements, and then you define the competencies required for various levels, various functions, various roles.
Okay.
The outcome of the design stage is you have all the competencies converted into a dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
So the simple way that we all understand dictionary is, if you want to know the meaning of any term, that you refer to a dictionary and you
Yes.
get to
True.
understand.
Yeah.
Today you find that in
Yes.
Google search and several other search platforms. So if someone needs to understand what does communication as a competency really mean in my organization context,
Mm-hmm.
what does coaching really mean in my organization context, I should be able to refer to the dictionary and understand what is the definition of this competency and what does it mean for someone at an individual performer level, for someone at a managing team level or managing function level. So what I mean is the communication capability for someone at a head of the department level, for someone at a team leader level, for someone at an independent contributor level would certainly vary, because as the complexity increases in the role, they would be required to demonstrate a higher proficiency level.
So we have a set of proficiency levels
Proficiency
when we
levels.
are defining the
Correct.
competencies.
So level
Okay.
1, level 2, level 3. So typically the global standard is 4 proficiency level for any competency.
Okay.
However, some organizations use level 5 and level 6 also.
Mm-hmm.
So at the design stage, you will have the dictionary developed with a definition and a 4-level proficiency level wise behavioral indicators defined.
All right.
So that's the design stage. Once you have it ready, then I think you will go for the assessment stage. At the assessment stage, it's about, you have the competencies available. Now I bring in the person to see whether this person is really, it's not about possessing, it's about demonstrating those knowledge and skills.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this methodology like assessment development center, 360
Yes.
degree feedback, and there are other methods also, including use of psychometric tools, etc.,
True.
which clearly brings out the capability that exists within the individual. At times, you may find that somebody who's a high potential but not exhibiting the required knowledge and skills. So all of these would also come out during this assessment process. And there have been instances where we have highlighted to the leadership team on the capabilities that an individual carries, and sometimes they are completely underutilized in the organization. So that also we highlight. So the outcome that you get in the assessment stages, you get to know who are the high potential employees,
Mm-hmm.
who are the people who may do well if they are given a different role, who are the people who really require coaching, who are the people uh, who is competent but does not seem to be really interested in the kind of role that's assigned to the individual. So all these are outcomes, and it helps the organization to really look at how many good successes do they have for all the critical roles, what kind of competency based training calendar they can create, how can they make use of this competency framework in their hiring process.
Mm-hmm.
These are all the outcome of the assessment stage. And then the development stage is where you really bring in a lot of interventions to improve the skill and knowledge of the individual. So that could mean having an IDP in place, or rolling out a coaching intervention, or enrolling themselves into a leadership programs, encouraging them to go for certain certification programs, asking them to be a mentee under someone who's a great leader in the organization. So all these are various possibilities. So essentially, it is executed in 3 stages. The objective needs to be kept in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Some organizations would say that I'm growing at 2x speed, and therefore I really would like to know if my internal talent would be sufficient enough to occupy the kind of new leadership roles that
True.
I'm going to be requiring, or kind of specialist role that I'm going to be creating. Do I have the talent really within my organization?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, this exercise or intervention is rolled out just to give opportunity for people to learn and grow, or it is to
Great.
say that the
Great.
company cares for them and cares for their development. So the
Mm-hmm.
objectives could be very different. So that needs to be articulated before the organization decides to roll out competency development intervention. But it is critical. It is critical as part of your HR excellence practice.
Great. Now, on the concern side, there are people who have gone through this framework says that, particularly on the assessment side, people feel that in one day's assessment, how you are going to, come up with our proficiency levels. Can you please alleviate the fear factor? I mean, that has been created by specialists like you, who are the biggest votaries of competency, competency framework.
It's not to say it's only through assessment development center facilitated by an expert trained assessor that we would be able to understand the strengths and limitations of an individual. We're not saying that.
Okay.
This can well be done by the internal facilitators as well, provided if they are trained to assess competence.
But in most cases, it happens that one day assessment they goes through, right?
One day, yeah, most of the times it's only a one day assessment with series of simulation exercises. The individual's behavior or consistent behavior is observed.
True.
But we must understand, so why is this ADC methodology applied?
Mm-hmm.
In organizations, supposing if you are reporting to me,
Yes.
my dialogue with most of the time, my dialogue with you always revolves around work and the performance side.
Yes.
It's very little that I look at, what abilities are you demonstrating and how is it impacting the performance.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk to you, I pick up the KPIs, and on the KPIs, what has been achieved, what has not been achieved. It's only around that I keep talking to you.
Okay.
It's only during the performance appraisal time when I have to give you a feedback, or during the quarterly appraisal time when I have to give you a feedback. It's when I actually talk about the strengths and limitations of yours.
Mm-hmm.
So typically what happens is, as a reporting manager, there is certain level of bias that I build with each of the members who are reporting to me.
Okay.
If I am a reporting manager who's not only looking at performance, but I'm equally curious and consciously looking at the competency level of my people, what behaviors are they demonstrating,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm as good as an assessor. So
Yes.
it's not necessarily my people need to be put through an assessment development center.
Okay.
So it's a question of, does the organization or the reporting managers really provide that conducive environment, or really bring in that expertise of providing that constructive feedback on competencies demonstrated and not demonstrated? Because I'll go back to, when you asked me this question on how do you define competency, so I spoke about it's a combination of knowledge, skill, and attitude. Right?
Yes.
So it's also about demonstrating them. So we call it as demonstrated behaviors. I might say that I'm very good at solving problems.
So there is an evidence being created
Yeah.
here. Yes.
So if I say I'm good at solving problems, what sort of problems I'm good at solving? Are they simple problems? Are they problems related to business? Are they problems related to people? Or am I an all-rounder in solving all sorts of problems, including simple and complex problems? If my reporting manager is watchful of the kind of scenarios that I've handled and the problems that I've solved, that itself is a very good assessment. And if my reporting manager is able to give me a constructive feedback in those lines, I don't necessarily need to go through this assessment development.
I get that. I get that point. But my question is like when we are engaging the external assessors to do this ADC and whatever you have said just now, how is that possible for the assessors to come with a horoscope of these participants in just one day's time with few tools? I believe you engage few tools also to assess the candidates.
Yeah. So
how
what
is it
happens?
possible?
Yeah. So what happens is the tools that are used in development center are called simulation tools. So which means we simulate an environment with challenges, with scenarios that the individual is likely to encounter in a real-time workplace. However, the background to those scenarios need not necessarily reflect the industry background, in the sense that if I'm assessing an employee who's from a retail background,
Okay.
I don't necessarily need to look at the competencies or abilities being demonstrated only on the retail background. So there are times in a large organization, they may have a retail business, they may have a manufacturing business, they may also have financial services business.
Mm-hmm.
And supposing if the company wants to move their talent from one business to another business, one is of course to leverage on the skills that they have, another is to provide them an opportunity to grow. I won't say that I am a HR manager who's very good only in the retail sector, but when I move into as an HR manager into, let's say, a financial services sector, I'm not a very good HR manager. There also I need to act as a good manager.
True.
Right. So whether I'm a good manager, whether I'm a good leader, whether I'm a good senior leader, shouldn't really be determined by the industry in which I work. So that is where the leadership element comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So the scenarios that we provide in the simulation exercises are diverse scenarios just to check what is the extent to which the individual is able to handle, respond, resolve
Mm-hmm.
issues, situations in varied scenarios. And the tools that we use are both tools that checks the ability of the individual and also the ability of an individual in a group scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So tools like behavioral event interview, case analysis and presentation, role play, business simulation exercises, group simulation exercises, leaderless group discussion, and leadership assessment test. All these are varied tools. And along with this, we can also deploy a psychometric tool.
Okay.
So a battery of tests seen by 3 or 4 assessors on a set of 6 to 8 competencies in which the individual is assessed over a period of, I would say, about 7 to 8 hours of time during the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a significant, you will get a significant insight about the individual.
Okay.
And obviously, on the very next day, all the assessors would sit together. They do the calibration exercise to come to a common understanding on the consistently demonstrated behaviors of an individual
Mm-hmm.
or the behaviors that were not
Throughout
demonstrated
this
also
process.
throughout this process.
Okay.
So it's a scientific process. It's a very proven scientific process which is practiced across the globe. However, a lot of preparation needs to be put in place to make sure that this is effectively rolled out.
Mm-hmm.
Beneficiary needs to see this as a scientific process, and it's only up to the individual whether the individual would like to take the outcome as it is or not. In my experience, I've seen both employees who agree to this, fully aligned to this, and then they enthusiastically agree to take up the IDP that you suggest. There are some employees who also would say that, my manager knows me better than what this facilitators would
Yes.
know by looking at my behaviors in the last
True.
7 to 8 hours. That's okay. I mean, they are right from their perspective. But as long as a facilitator, if you have actually put the methodology, applied the proper methodology, if you have been fair in deploying the right kind of tools and following the assessment methodology right, I think, I would say if those are the fundamentals to be taken care.
So if we also use something like a 360-degree feedback along with competency, do you think that both these will match when we do the assessment?
It's not necessary it should match
Okay.
because 360 degree is more about internal perspective and
Mm-hmm.
development center assessment is more about external perspective.
All right. All right.
So internal to roll out this 360-degree feedback method, you need to have certain level of maturity in the organization as well.
Yes.
For example, if people are not open to give a candid feedback,
Mm-hmm.
if feedback from my peers are not appreciated,
True.
if the culture is so hierarchical that anyone who gives feedback below the level of my grade or below the level of my position in the organization, I would not appreciate that. If such a situation or such a scenario exists, I wouldn't recommend companies going in for 360-degree feedback methodology.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of time, what also happens here is what is the extent to which a confidentiality is maintained in having the 360-degree feedback processed. If those are things that are taken care at an appropriate time, 360-degree feedback method can be launched. I have seen some organizations effectively make use of both the methodologies. They bring in an external facilitator to roll out the development center. They also put in a very robust 360-degree feedback methodology to check the internal perspectives. And when the feedback is given to the employee, when the individual development plan is created for the employee, they make use of the feedback from both the reports. It's a very effective one. Having said that, would we find a complete alignment and a complete coincidence between the feedback in both those reports? Not necessarily.
Not
There could be
necessarily.
some, there need not be some.